Hey everyone, welcome back to the Godcast. That we are here, episode 8 on Ahmadiyya Islam. We are joined here by Mr. Malik from the Ahmadiyya community in our local area. And this has been a highly anticipated interview for us because we have not had a Muslim perspective yet. We've had a Jewish perspective, which is an episode that will be coming out soon, either here on Spotify or exclusively on YouTube. And we've already discussed Christianity in the past, so we were looking very excited to talk about Islam, specifically Ahmadiyya Islam. So that being said, I will take it away with the first questions. So Mr. Malik, first of all, before the question begins, I'd like to say I'm super excited for this. I'm genuinely interested in learning about this because this is something that has caught my attention a little while ago, and I thought this would be a super cool topic to discuss. So that being said, I'll just jump into the question. So every religion begins with the story of its founder, whether we're talking about, the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem to Mary and Joseph, according to the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. And that's, of course, in Christianity and also in Islam as well. And his ministry, his passion, and death in Christian tradition. I know that's not really in Muslim tradition. And then his resurrection in Christian tradition. And then if we talk about the Muslim origin story, this begins with, of course, what Muslims such as yourself believe that, of course, we have the angel Gabriel appear to Muhammad. He begins his ministry from there. And then in Zoroastrianism, as a third example, he receives a revelation from Ahura Mazda when he's bathing in a river, and that begins his ministry. So that being said, we know that Ahmadiyya Islam begins with the life of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. So could you tell us the story of his life from his birth all the way to his death and the establishment of the Ahmadiyya non-political caliphate under Hakim Nur ud Din, if that is pronounced correctly? Probably not.
Sure. Thank you, Xavier, for having me, and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all. I belong to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, which is a revival movement within Islam. So we find ourselves in complete unison with the religion of Islam. So we claim we're Muslims. So, of course, our origin story as Muslims dates back to the Prophet of Islam, Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him. And being a Muslim also requires us to believe in the truthfulness of actually all prophets. So we believe as Muslims that God spoke to many people throughout history, and he did not, preclude any people from giving them divine guidance. And in that sense, he sent prophets to all times and all peoples, and many of them we don't even know of. But in principle, we agree that he guided all of humanity. So as Muslims, we also believe in this universal truth that God speaks to his chosen ones, whom we call prophets. And in essence, a Muslim cannot call himself or herself a Muslim until they agree to this universal philosophy, by which means you can say our origin exists at the very onset of revelation with the first prophet that we know of as Prophet Adam. So with that background, I can tell you a little bit about the community which I belong to, and the reason why it is a different community within Islam, and why I call ourselves as a revival movement within Islam. You see, in Islam, and in actuality, in many religions, there's the concept of a reformer. For example, if you look at Judaism, they're still waiting for the Messiah to come. Christians believe that the Messiah has come, which reformed them. Similarly, if you look at even Hinduism, they're waiting for the reincarnation of Krishna. And so there's always this concept that a reformer would come in the latter days to reform the people. And we as Muslims also believe that a reformer is to come in the shape of Jesus. So we as a community believe that whenever there's a understanding that a reformer will come, that is actually a metaphorical coming of someone. It is not the literal coming of the same person. For example, this is substantiated by Jesus himself, because one of the reasons, as you all may know, that the Jews did not accept Jesus, peace be upon him, to be the Messiah was that they were waiting for the coming of Elijah in his person to call out who this person Jesus will be. So they're still waiting for this literal coming of Elijah, right? But Jesus himself said that Elijah is actually John the Baptist, because he has fulfilled that role of calling me out as the Messiah. So the same philosophy exists in Islam. Whenever there's a mention of somebody coming back, somebody with a certain role, instead of saying that that person is going to be, unknown, the qualities of a similar person is mentioned. For example, in this case, the quality of a Messiah, as Jesus was. So we believe that that reformer, which was to come in the shape of Jesus, came in the shape of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who was the founder of our community. And he was born in 1835 in a small village in Qadian, in India. And that's where this reformist movement started. And his claim was that he has not brought any new law. He has not added or taken away from the core teachings of Islam. He has come to revive the followers of Islam. So the people who follow and attribute themselves as followers of Islam had, uh, over time needed reformation. And that's the whole reason he came, was to reform them and to correct their beliefs. And in the same vein, he said that since we've matured as a humanity to a point that we've become a sort of a global village, ideas flow from one point to another point freely now in a matter of seconds, right? He said that all those people who are being evaded to be as reformers are basically being fulfilled in my personality. So I am here to unite all these different religions under the banner of this one reformer, under the banner of Islam, and Islam being the universal teachings for all of humanity. So that's basically, on a high level, his claim. And at first, he did not claim that even though people are saying that you're a holy person, you should start having people initiate on your hands. He said, I cannot do that. It's not something that, somebody can just ask me to do it and I'll start doing it. So eventually it was revealed to him in 1889 that he should start accepting initiation on his hand. And that's where the community was formally started. And we became known as the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And he attributed all that he had found, all the wisdom that he had found, was from the Holy Quran and from the practice of the Prophet of Islam and the sayings of the Prophet as well. So he did not claim any new law or anything of that sort. And when this movement started, before him claiming that he is a chosen one, he's the Messiah, he is fulfilling the metaphorical second coming of Jesus, he was praised, he was honored, he was respected amongst the intellectuals, amongst the clerics, amongst the clergy. But as soon as he claimed that he actually was chosen as a prophet by God, you can imagine what happens then, right? All the tables turn. People, it's a test of a prophet, actually, is persecution, right? Every prophet in their lifetime, if they faced persecution, and he faced persecution as well. And all the people who praised him as being a divine guide and a leader turned against him and said he was a liar, he was a imposter, God forbid. And his members of his community are still to this day persecuted in some parts of the world. And you know, the mission continues right now. Um, as a community, we're established all over the world. And when he passed away, um, he was succeeded by what is called caliphate, which is basically a divine leader within the community, which continues to guide the community. So we've had five leaders ever since he passed away, and our current leader, which whom we call Khalifa or Caliph in English, resides in the United Kingdom, and he's our divine leader. He's our guide, and he guides the worldwide community from the United Kingdom. But in essence, the life of Promised Messiah has been reflected in the works that he has done. He has written over 80 books, um, all expounding the beauties of religion, morality, faith, and Islam, comparative religions. Actually, the last book that he wrote is called The Message of Peace, because in that book he talks about, besides having differences in different religions, the end goal for us as humanity is to live in peace amongst each other. So his final book was on this topic. It was like, how can we exist in different, belonging to different, religion, theology, theological differences, sometimes very grave differences, right? And yet exist with peace. So if I get an opportunity, I'd like to maybe read a little bit from that book, because his words will be much more powerful for people to understand, what he came for, and what he stood for. So that's on a high level. I can go into more depth of what his teachings were, what his understanding was. But if you have any other questions, you can ask them. If not, I can continue talking about him.
Yeah, like we'd love to hear you continue to talk about his life, and like in terms of reading his writings, like we actually have another question where we're talking about like what texts are used. So we'd love it if like you could like read some of his writings for that question. Unless if you want to do it now, but for now, like it'd be awesome if you could like maybe talk about like his life, a little bit more about his life, like how the community formed, who were some like key members in there. Because I know that the first caliph was like his I guess kind of like his number one disciple. He would like, or I guess he'd help organize debates for him and things like that. From my super brief readings, maybe you could just talk about who are some of the key figures who worked alongside him during his life.
Yeah. So as you've rightfully pointed out, the first caliph was a very devout follower of his, and he was actually a very well learned scholar himself. And he was actually a physician as well. He was a physician to the Maharaja, which is kind of like a ruler of Kashmir. And he was his royal physician, and he was very good at it as well. So he was not only just a religious scholar, he was actually a practicing physician as well. And his attention was drawn to Promised Messiah by reading some of his text. And that's where a lot of emphasis is made in our community, is to understand the life of Promised Messiah, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, is by reading what he did, what he wrote about, right? He is called in our community the master of pen, because he wrote over 80 books. But these 80 books are replete with pearls of wisdom, which um, can really transform a person, right? And that happened to the first um, caliph, Hakim Nuruddin. And when he came to know of Promised Messiah, he went to him and he spent some time with him, and eventually, accepted him as the Messiah. We also find that the story of a lot of the early disciples is that they're impressed by being in company with the Prophet. So they know of the truth by meeting with the Prophet, by listening to him. And there are so many stories within our community where even people who had the intention of harming the promised Messiah went and visited him and spent some time and eventually became members of the community. They were actually sent with instructions on, hey, go take notes on what he's preaching so we can find faults in him. And these people would go secretly into the meetings and take notes, meticulous notes of like what he's talking about, what is he teaching. And interestingly, they couldn't find any flaw in them. And it impressed them so much that they became Ahmadis. They became Ahmadi Muslims themselves. And the people who sent them were, kind of wondering what happened to that person that we sent. And then he will write that, I find no fault in this man, and I find him to be truthful. And that's how they became the followers of the community. So when the promised Messiah passed away, it is our belief that people within our community, kind of like the way a pope is elected, we believe that people in our community are divinely inspired to elect a successor. And when the promised Messiah passed away, it was him who was elected. And he really created the foundation for, because as you imagine, when a prophet passes away, there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of anxiety among the membership. What is going to happen with the community, right? And there's also a lot of vulnerability at that time, right? Because you have people who have different intentions. You may have some hypocrites who are there to harm the community. So they're undermining the mission of that person. So that's why God has created this concept of successorship, because no person in their entire lifetime can create a mission and then sustain it, right? So the sustainability comes from the successors. And after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, passed away, there was a successorship. There were 4 caliphs, we call. And similarly, when Promised Messiah passed away, it was him, the first Khalifa, who established this institution within our community. And ever since, we've had 4 more after him. And that established the community. Now, as far as the core teachings of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad go, the Promised Messiah go, one of the biggest misunderstandings or the challenges that even you may see that the Muslim world is facing is this concept of use of force within religion, right? You have the hardliners who say that you can use the force and convert the whole world, and if somebody doesn't agree with you, you have the right to take their life, and things like that. So Promised Messiah beautifully explained that nowhere in the religion of Islam can you take innocent life, regardless of their faith, because in the Holy Quran, even if somebody gives up their faith, like for example, if they're Muslim, or they belong to a community and they call themselves Muslims, if they give up their faith, the Holy Quran says that if somebody gives up their faith once, twice, thrice, leave them to God. There is no action to be taken by an individual, because faith and religion is between them and God. So he clarified this very important point, that you cannot use force to coerce people, because the Holy Quran explicitly says that there is no compulsion in the matters of faith. You cannot compel somebody to be good, right? Because morality exists with choice. And that's what he explained beautifully, that if you start compelling people, even if you feel that Islam is right and Islam is the right way, people should be, but by forcing them, you're taking away the very good that Islam wants to create in people. And similarly, in any religion, if you use force to coerce people to do the right thing, you cannot call it moral. It is the force that is making them act a certain way. So he beautifully explained this concept. The second very important thing that he did was he said that nowadays Islam is not being attacked for it being a religion. It is being attacked by the pen. There is no physical threat to Islam. The threat that exists to Islam today is intellectual one. There are people writing against Islam. They're writing against the Prophet of Islam. So this day and age, if you want to um, wage what is called this moral campaign against the perpetrators who are committing, who are attacking Islam, you have to use the pen. There is no need to use force. And he said that we live in a time where people are not being threatened as a result of their um, religious backgrounds. They're being threatened because people want their lands, because they want to exploit their resources, they want influence, power, things of that nature. We have, as a humanity, have come to a point. They may use religion as a crutch, right? As an excuse. But in reality, they could care less. They're irreligious people. Most of these people, they don't even believe in God, right? They're who are against a certain aspect. Because if they were true believers of God, they wouldn't, perpetrate crimes against humanity and cause such harm. So that's sort of a litmus test for somebody to claim that, I'm a spiritual person, but I'm going about, killing people. For example, if somebody was to ask you, like, what do you think about the Crusaders, right? If you're a true Christian, it'll be very hard for you to justify their actions, right? The way they, you know, attacked innocent people and took innocent lives. So he explained that this day and age, religion and Islam particularly needs to be defended intellectually. And he made that into a point. And actually, one of the reasons why he's even persecuted by the hardliners is because he said that there is no room for this physical jihad anymore because the conditions don't exist. Your religion is not being threatened or extinction. And you're not being attacked because of your faith. It is because of your lands and other things. So when he said that, of course, there was persecution, but he clarified for us as members of this community that we cannot use force in the name of religion. And it has no place in it. It has never had any place. It was allowed in the time of the Prophet because he had to defend himself and defend the believers because the reason they were attacked was because they wanted to extinguish Islam completely so they could wipe it off the face of the planet. And that's the reason why he was allowed to defend himself and never be the aggressor. Right. So that's one of the things he clarified for Muslims at large, and and made it so that people can understand this very difficult topic. And people, as you can probably tell, still are struggling with this idea within Islam because sometimes the political lines are blurred, especially in the early parts of Islam. So they think that everything that happened, there is no such, distinction between, or separation between what happens in the state and what happens with the religion or church and state. Islam basically says that you should have these separately, and they should not be combined. So that's one example of what he taught and how he explained a somewhat difficult concept. And of course, then clarifying the need for a Messiah and a universal Messiah, which is a very powerful concept because if you think about it, if for a moment we assume that there is going to be a Messiah that Jews are waiting for is going to come, and then Jesus of Nazareth is going to come back literally, and then Krishna is going to come, and Zoroaster is going to come, and Buddha is going to have his second appearance. all of these religions as they exist today are very different on what they preach as far as the concept of God and morality and salvation and things like that. If they were to appear, they will pull these people further apart. So he said that that Messiah that is to come is actually going to be a uniting force. And he is that uniting force that is to unite all religions. So that's another very powerful concept that he brought and explained to Muslims and corrected their misunderstanding that exists even today. The other aspect that he explained was in relation to the dues that we as humans have. For example, he said that there is a lot of animosity amongst people of faith, and it stems from the fact that the leaders flame the flame, fuel the flames of hatred among people. So it is important that when we converse with one another, we converse on a common ground. For example, if we can agree to the fact that um, injustice in a certain way is wrong, now let's come together to address injustice from your religious perspective and from my religious perspective. This will be a much more powerful exercise than to um, draw, cartoons or caricatures of each other's founders who we both love, right? So the natural reaction you'll get is you'll have more hatred among people. So he even said that it was unheard of at the time that people would ask him to come debate with him, and sometimes he would say, "I agree with what you say. There's no point in debating," which is unheard of because if you know debaters or people who have some knowledge, they would find a way of just arguing with you. But he said that the purpose of these dialogues and this conversation should be to guide people. It is not to show that I am mightier in my argumentation and I am much more sound in my analysis. So things like that really spoke to people of the time, where most of the dialogue was like, how can I make you come down, throw more mud at you, make foul your beliefs, make fun of what you stand for, and that was a breath of fresh air. And then the second, which is particular to Muslims, is that he really expounded on the beauties of Islam, because Muslims at that time when he came were in a sort of an apologetic state, because their understanding of Islam was very crude, and their following of the teachings of Islam was actually pretty had suffered, right? So he revived them and explained the beauties of the faith, so they can become a more stable follower, right? And not rely on the cleric, because uh, as Muslims we believe that as individuals we are all capable of creating a living relationship with God. You don't need an intermediary. A prophet is merely a guide. We don't even pray to a prophet, right? We're actually told not to pray to a prophet. We're always told to pray to God, because God can be the answer of the prayers, and he can create a relationship with whomever he chooses, right? So that's one very important thing that he brought in a time when people thought that prayer was a good exercise. It doesn't do anything, it changes nothing. If you do it, it's good for you. If you don't do it, things will still happen. But he said that if you believe in a living God, you must believe in the power of prayer. And the power of prayer means that there is some cause and effect, right? There is some change that happens. and he showed practically how his prayers were heard. If you look at his life, a false murder case was brought against him. Um, he was brought into the court by many people on false charges, um, and they were unsuccessful by mere, God's grace. So all those things are a testament to who he was as a prophet. Of course, there are prophecies about the second coming of the Messiah, which he fulfilled as well. And perhaps at a later time we can go into those. But those are some of the things that I can share, time permitting. But I do wanted to go over some of the text that he had, and perhaps that's a good point, a good place to end. Unless Xavier, you have anything else you would like to ask or comment
Oh
on?
yeah, so like the meeting will end automatically, but we can just jump back onto the same Zoom code if that's good. Because that way it just gets back onto it and it gives like the next period of time. But like, yeah, that was awesome. Like one of the things that like struck me about the religion is that the founder he's preached an explicit message of peace, and that really kind of drew me in. I thought to myself, wow, that's because we see different denominations of all religions in which that's like not taught. We can probably obviously think of some historical examples, but he went along and said like jihad of the pen as opposed to jihad of the sword. And I thought that was super fascinating. Another thing that I just thought of like a few minutes ago was that the people who were like the followers of him, both he and his followers, specifically the first caliph, was these people were very intellectual. I know I'm just reading this article here, and it says that the first caliph was actually an expert in Arabic and Hebrew. I don't know if that's I think that's true. I'm just reading this off of Wikipedia here, but I know that he went to like Mecca and Medina to study. So I thought that was cool. And then also the founder, the promised Messiah, he was also a debater. So I thought that was really cool how these guys were both preaching a message of peace and they were intellectual too.
Yep, and that's one of the things that people used to get surprised when people would join the community, because a lot of the people that even I talked to you about who were sent in as like quote unquote spies were actually intellectuals and leaders within their community, their own communities. So when they accepted him as the Messiah, it was naturally a shock for many, and that actually led to a lot of the other people accepting them, because even in my village where I'm from, the one of the most honored amongst us was the first few who accepted promised Messiah, and that actually led to the whole village, not the whole, but majority of the village, then accepting promised Messiah, because he was an example for us, right? And he was a guide for us spiritually. So when he accepted, people asked him, he gave them sound reasons, and then eventually, that's the reason the whole village became. And that's actually a trend that happens within a lot of the people who come to our communities. Like a lot of the leaders become Ahmadis first, and they become members of our community, and that is the reason. Then all the other are encouraged to look into it, and then eventually they become as well.
Wow, and then like I think like the meeting might end soon, but like I something that I just want, but then obviously we can jump back on. But something I just wanted to add was I was looking at like the statistics behind it, and I guess this community is like one of the. It seems to me like it's one of the fastest growing religions on earth. There's already from 1889, if I'm correct, all the way until now. There's like 10 to 20 million people. So I thought that was like a good thing to mention how fast it's been growing. And then I just like wanted to ask I wanted to ask about the proofs behind why he is the Messiah, the Mahdi. I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but that figure. But I'll also maybe I could ask, and I'll also hand over the mic. Well, I'm actually not going to physically hand it over, but to Balin and like Rylan and Noah. But I'll just ask. We can just start this off before the meeting ends. So. Like you mentioned before, what are some proofs that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, is the Mahdi or Messiah?
Sure. Yeah. So the there are many um, proofs and reasons which are given in the truthfulness of promised Messiah. One of the ones I've shared that the promised Messiah himself was as a testament to his truthfulness. But the Holy Quran speaks of um, a man to come in the latter days, and it is promised that that person would come and he would be from among the people who have not the term is used who have not yet joined them. So I was talking about one of the proofs was that in the Holy Quran it is mentioned that um, God will raise up a prophet who has not yet joined the followers of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And when this particular verse was revealed, a companion of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, peace be upon him, asked the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who are these people who these words are referred to, like who have not yet joined us? So the same person inquired a few times, and it was the practice of the Prophet, peace and blessings of God be upon him, that when he was asked the same question a few times, he would pause, because sometimes he would wait for divine revelation to answer such a question. And it is said that this is one of those moments where he paused, and then he said that it would be somebody from the people of Salman the Persian, who was one of the companions of the Prophet of Islam. Now we believe that was an indication towards the coming of the Messiah belonging to the Persian people. Now, the promised Messiah, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, was of Persian descent, and it was they had moved from Persia into India, where they were residing, but they were originally from the Barlas family, which is part of Persia. So that was one verse from the Holy Quran, coupled with a saying of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, which basically says the background of the promised Messiah. But there are many other signs and prophecies which were fulfilled. One of the ones that was fulfilled was the prophecy of a lunar and a solar eclipse. And never in the history of humanity as this has happened when a claimant of a Messiah or Mahdi exists. It has only happened in the life of promised Messiah, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, that he existed and he had claimed to be the Messiah. And these two events took place, which is the sign of a lunar as well as a solar eclipse within the same month of the holy month of fasting, Ramadan. So, the details of that prophecies are available on our website if you wanted to dig into it a bit more. The other very strong prophecy, which is fulfilled and being fulfilled to this day, is the same hadith, or the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of God be upon him, said when this verse was revealed, where he said that the people from his group, which is Salman the Persians, which basically says that faith will ascend into the heavens. The mosques will be full of worshippers, but they will be devoid of faith. People will recite the Holy Quran very well, but they will not understand what it means. And at that time, a man would come from the people of Persia who would revive and bring back into earth. So that was basically, in essence, the message of the promised Messiah. right? And it is still being fulfilled because his purpose is to kindle the fire of love of God within people's hearts. And that's why he's come. Muslims existed in great number during his time, and they still do. And the mosques are filled with worshippers as well. But if the heart is empty of faith, they're basically mechanically following Islam and not understanding the spirit behind it. So that was one other goal of Promised Messiah, which is mentioned in that same saying that I shared. The other hadith is that Islam will be divided. There will be many divisions within Islam, and only one of those divisions will be the right community or the right Jamaat, and that community would belong to those who are like the Prophet and his companions. Now, if you look at the life of the Prophet and his companions, they were persecuted. And our community is persecuted by all the divisions within Islam. So they unite against the community of Promised Messiah, against our community. And that is another sign that, we can't control them, right? We cannot control what they do, but they've all combined together in one bucket against our community, thus fulfilling this hadith as well of Holy Prophet ﷺ, that there will be only one community, which would be the right community, and all the others will be opposing them. So those are some of the examples. There's, of course, the sign of Latter Days, like what constitutes as Latter Days, and the prophecies associated with that, which talk about the time of the Messiah, not specifically his person, but speaks to the time of the Messiah. For example, use of books, the use of modern day transportation. These are all documented in the sayings of the Holy Prophet as being the time when the Messiah would come, or the latter days when the Messiah is is prophesied to come, which we believe is this current day and age. And Promised Messiah, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, came during this time. And then I think the biggest reason to believe in the Promised Messiah, like I said, is to look at what he taught, what he wrote, because that's a good sign of understanding whether he was truthful or not. And the prophecies, of course, enhance your faith, right? Because if you look at this, solar and lunar eclipse, there's no denying it. It's been recorded in history. And it is an indication of him. Not a lot of people just look at that prophecy and become members of the community. They actually study the life of the Promised Messiah, and that's the reason why they're attracted to it. And in actuality, I can share like a small incident. There was one person who was investigating our community, whether it was truthful or not. And they went and they asked that, I've been trying to figure this Ahmadiyya Muslim community out. I'm not really sure. Guide me, convince me somehow. So the person asked him a simple question: have you read anything from Promised Messiah? And the person goes, yes, I have. So then they asked, when you read something that he has written, does that make you feel closer to God or make you feel that you're going away from God? He said, definitely closer to God. Like, okay, thank you very much. There's your answer, right? So for different people, it's different things, right? But it's important to understand that if you want to investigate this community, the body of work of this prophet, who we claim to be prophet, is available to anybody in the world. And they can ascertain quickly whether this man is truthful or not. And these prophecies enhance your faith, of course, but we believe that the the truth of somebody comes from understanding what they stood for, and when and God really changes hearts, anyways. So once that happens, then you understand whether they were truthful or not.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have more to add?
No, that's it.
Yeah, like this is something I'll definitely have to look into more because I would frequently look at the the webpage, the worldwide one. It's like called allislam.org, I believe. And like it has like a lot of his works written out, like Jesus in India as an example. I think there's definitely an audiobook of that one. Um, Also, it has like his how he fulfills the prophecies. I know that there's four on their webpage, and one of them says that the Mahdi, the Messiah, will be born east of Damascus. So that was like something that definitely fits in if he's born in India or present day Pakistan, one of the two. That's east of Damascus. Was something I just wanted to add because I like learned that from the website, and also yeah, I'll definitely have to like look into his works. Because there's such a plethora of them, and what he's taught to me sounds like that actually that makes sense. It's like it's peace, and it's also like you said before, it's like intellectual study with like debating and like I said before, like the first caliph, he was a very learned guy, and he was a man of science. He was a physician, so that kind of to me seems like the right way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a book on the life of the first caliph as well. So if you're interested, I can certainly share that. But alislam.org, alislam.org, you said, is an excellent resource. Really, all his books are available. Some of them, not all of them, available in English, but certainly a good volume of them in English as well. And there's some audiobooks as well for you to look into. But if you were to pick one book up, I would recommend the small book that he wrote, just called Philosophy of the Teaching of Islam, which was basically a lecture that was delivered during a interfaith conference in India. And it was written by him, but it was read at the conference by one of his companions. Um, and it is actually a very good expose on basically understanding the philosophy of the religion Islam. It has really good examples of that. So, if anything, I would highly recommend. I think, a small book if you wanted to pick up his writings, but you can pick other ones that are more interesting to you as well. Um, but if we can maybe end with, if I could read a little bit from Message of Peace that he wrote, which is pretty powerful.
Yes, absolutely. And I also wrote that down. Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam. Yeah, like if you want to end it there, that's awesome. Yeah, if we could, you could do your reading.
Well, thank you for allowing that, Xavier. Appreciate it. So, as I mentioned before, the last book that he wrote was called Message of Peace. On page 6, at the beginning, he's addressing all of us, and he's saying, "My countrymen," and I quote, "a religion which does not inculcate universal compassion is no religion at all. Similarly, a human being without the faculty of compassion is no human at all. Our God has never discriminated between one people and another. This is illustrated by the fact that all the potentials and capabilities which have been granted to the Aryans have also been granted to the races inhabiting Arabia, Persia, Syria, China, Japan, Europe, and America. The earth created by God provides a common floor for all the people alike, and his sun and moon and many stars are a source of radiance and provide many other benefits to all alike. Likewise, all peoples benefit from the elements created by him, such as air, water, fire, and earth. and similarly from other products created by him, like grain, fruit, and healing agents. These attributes of God teach us the lesson that we too should behave magnanimously and kindly towards our fellow human beings and should not be of petty, of heart, and illiberal. This goes on, but this is maybe to whet your appetite and listen to what he has written himself.
Wow, that was very pretty. And like, what book is that? What book is that contained in?
Message of Peace. This was the last book he penned.
Wow, I'll write that down right now. Let's see. Awesome, and thank you so much for sharing all that with you. I have like I'm left with like two reading assignments that I'll have to look into. Both Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam and Message of Peace are two books I'll try to read those this month for like more information, because this is like a super interesting, and I think it contains a lot of wisdom. This sect denomination of Islam. So thank you so much, Mr. Malik, for being on our podcast. And if you have anything else to say, you could say that obviously, or if not, then we can just kind of end it here if that works with you.
Absolutely. I want to just echo my appreciation for you for reaching out and giving me an opportunity to speak to you all. It's definitely been a pleasure. And I wish you all the best. There's not a lot of young people talking about God these days, whether in a comparative way and things like that. So looking at your young, fresh faces and having this conversation, it's been a delight. And I wish you all the best. Let me know if we can help you with anything in the future as well.
Wow, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.